Welcome to the Sleep Narrator. I know you use these videos to drift off into slumber, so before you close your eyes, take a second to like the video and subscribe. Also, let me know. Where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? Now, settle in, get comfortable, and let your mind wander as I tell you a story. The endless night. The rain had not stopped for 3 days. It fell in steady sheets over the town of Black Hollow, a place tucked so deep in the valley that the sun itself often forgot to rise. Fog crept through the narrow streets, curling around lampposts like silent fingers. The buildings, brick and stone relics of another century, stood dark and empty, their windows staring blankly into the storm. Detective Elias Graves leaned against the worn leather armchair in his study, swirling a glass of whiskey in his hand. The fire crackled in the hearth, but it did little to chase away the damp chill that clung to the old house. His cat, a scrappy tabby named Fitch, stretched lazily on the windowsill, watching the world drown. A knock at the door shattered the quiet. It wasn't loud, but it was firm. 3 deliberate raps, followed by a pause. Elias sighed. It was always something. He set the glass down and strode across the room, undoing the locks. When he opened the door, a woman stood on his porch, her coat dripping with rain. Her face was pale, her dark eyes too large for her thin face. "Detective Graves?" Her voice was barely a whisper. Elias nodded. "I need your help," she said. "My brother is missing, and I think someone took him." A gust of wind sent rain slanting into the house. Elias stepped aside. "Come in." The woman hesitated for only a moment before stepping across the threshold. She left a trail of water as she walked into the study, pausing by the fire as if trying to pull warmth into her bones. Elias shut the door. "Start from the beginning." The woman turned, her wet coat steaming slightly in the heat of the room. "My name is Lillian Carter. My brother Samuel disappeared 3 nights ago. The last time anyone saw him, he was walking home from the Black Hollow Library. He never made it home." Elias took a seat in the chair across from her. "People go missing in this town all the time, Miss Carter. Sometimes they come back," she swallowed. "Not Samuel. He left me a message before he vanished. A note." She reached into her pocket, pulled out a crumpled piece of paper, and handed it to Elias. The writing was jagged, as if scrawled in a hurry. "If anything happens to me, look for the man with no face." Elias frowned. "The man with no face?" Lillian nodded. "Do you know what it means?" He did. And that was the problem. Elias stared at the note for a long moment, the words "the man with no face" clawing at the edges of his memory. It wasn't just a phrase, it was a ghost, something whispered in hushed voices in the darkest corners of Black Hollow. He folded the paper carefully and slipped it into his pocket. "When was the last time you saw Samuel?" he asked. "That evening," Lillian said. "I was home making dinner. He told me he'd be back in an hour." Her voice wavered. "He never came home?" Elias leaned forward, studying her. She was young, early 20s maybe, but the shadows under her eyes told him she hadn't slept in days. Her hands trembled slightly, as if she were trying to hold herself together by sheer will. Did he mention anything strange before he disappeared? Is anyone bothering him? Lillian hesitated. No, but he had been acting differently lately. Nervous. He kept saying he was onto something. Onto what? I don't know. She glanced at the fire, her eyes reflecting the flickering light. Samuel was a historian. He was always digging into the town's past. He worked at the Black Hollow Library down in the archives. A few weeks ago, he started telling me he'd found something dangerous. Elias's jaw tightened. Black Hollow had many secrets. Most of them were buried deep, left undisturbed for a reason. Did he say anything about what he found? Lillian nodded. Just one thing. She took a slow breath before whispering the words. The town never sleeps. Elias felt the chill creep into his bones. The town never sleeps. It was an old phrase, older than Black Hollow itself. He'd heard it before, long ago from an old man who had vanished soon after uttering those same words. Something was wrong. Very wrong. It was nearly midnight when Elias stepped out into the rain. Lillian had left after an hour of uneasy silence, but not before making him promise to find her brother. Elias had given her a nod. Nothing more. Promises were dangerous in a place like Black Hollow. The streets were empty, slick with rain, the gas lamps flickering through the thick fog. The town had an eerie stillness to it, as if it were holding its breath. Elias walked with purpose, his coat pulled tight against the cold. He had one destination in mind, the Black Hollow Library. It wasn't just any library. It was old, far older than it should have been. Some said it had been built before the town itself, its foundations set in something much deeper than stone. When he reached the towering iron gates, he found them unlocked. That was the first bad sign. The second was the door, ajar, swinging slightly in the wind. Elias stepped inside. The scent of old paper and damp wood filled the air. The main hall stretched before him, lined with endless rows of towering bookshelves. A dim lantern flickered on the front desk, casting long shadows. He listened. Silence. Elias moved deeper inside, his footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. Somewhere in the distance, a clock ticked. Slow, deliberate, each second dragging into the next. He reached the archives, a heavy iron door at the back of the library. It was locked, but there were fresh scratches around the keyhole. Someone had forced their way in recently. Elias pulled a set of lockpicks from his pocket and went to work. Within seconds, the lock clicked, and the door groaned open. The air inside was colder. Dust hung in the light of his lantern, untouched for years, except for the single set of footprints leading into the dark. Elias followed. The room was filled with ancient books, stacked high on wooden tables, their pages yellowed with age. In the center of the room sat an old desk, and on it, spread out like a madman's obsession, were notes, maps, and old photographs. Elias moved closer. Most of the papers were records of Black Hollow's history. Names, dates, events long forgotten. But one thing caught his eye. A photograph. It was old, the edges frayed, the ink faded. It showed the town square decades ago. People stood in a crowd, dressed in black, their faces blurred with time. All except for one figure, a tall man, standing at the edge of the square. His face was missing, not blurred, not damaged, just gone, as if someone had erased it from existence. Elias's grip tightened around the photograph. The man with no face. A creak sounded behind him. Elias spun, his hand instinctively reaching for the revolver at his side. But the room was empty, or so it seemed. Something shifted in the shadows. A whisper of movement, a flicker of darkness that shouldn't have been there. Then, the lantern on the desk went out, and the room was swallowed in black. For a long moment, Elias stood perfectly still. The darkness pressed around him, thick and suffocating. Then, a voice, soft, like wind through dead leaves. "You shouldn't be here." Elias drew his gun. "Show yourself." Silence. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling him. Elias turned, trying to follow the sound. His pulse was steady, but his fingers tightened around the grip of his revolver. "Who are you?" he asked. A faint chuckle. "You already know." Elias exhaled through his nose. "The man with no face." Silence again. Then, closer this time. Names are such fragile things. Elias kept his back against the desk. He had seen many things in Black Hollow. Some could be explained, others were like this. Not quite real, not quite human. "You took Samuel Carter," Elias said. It wasn't a question. The air felt heavier. "I took nothing," the voice whispered. "I only watch." A shape moved in the dark, shifting along the bookshelves. A figure, tall, lean, wrapped in shadows. Elias could just make out the outline of a man, but his face, there was nothing. No eyes, no mouth, no features at all. Just smooth, empty skin where a face should have been. Elias leveled the gun. "Where is he?" The hollow man tilted his head. "Close," he said, "but not for long." Elias didn't hesitate. He pulled the trigger. The gunshot shattered the silence. But when the light from the muzzle flash illuminated the room, the hollow man was gone. And from somewhere deep within the library, a scream echoed through the halls. The scream rippled through the dark, a sharp, anguished sound that seemed to twist in the air before fading into silence. Elias moved, his lantern still dark, his pulse steady. He had fired his gun, but the hollow man was gone, if he had ever truly been there at all. The only thing left was that scream. It had come from somewhere deep within the library. Elias reloaded his revolver, the sound of metal on metal sharp in the hush. Then, moving carefully, he followed the sound. The archive room led to a narrow corridor, lined with more old books and cabinets filled with forgotten records. The air smelled of mildew and time. The scream had come from ahead. He reached a door at the end of the corridor, old wood, heavy, reinforced with iron. There was no lock, only a rusted handle. Elias turned it. The door groaned open. What lay beyond made him stop. It was another room, but unlike the others, this one felt different. The floor was stone, damp and uneven. The walls were carved rock, as if someone had cut a space out of the earth itself. And in the center of the room, a staircase spiraling downward into absolute black. Elias stood at the threshold, listening. No sound. But the scream had come from down there. He hesitated only a moment before stepping forward. The stone steps were slick beneath his boots. The deeper he went, the colder it became, the air thick and heavy. It smelled like earth and something else. Something metallic. The steps ended in a long hallway. The walls were rough stone, ancient and uneven. Along the corridor he saw doors. They were spaced evenly apart, each made of thick wood, each set with a small iron grate at eye level. Cells. The Black Hollow Library had a prison beneath it. Elias moved forward. Most of the doors were shut, their locks rusted, their rooms long abandoned. But one, near the very end of the corridor, was open. And inside, a figure huddled in the corner. Elias stepped in, keeping his gun raised. "Samuel Carter?" The figure flinched at the sound of his name. Elias took another step forward, his lantern finally flickering back to life. The dim light revealed a young man, thin, gaunt, his clothes torn and dirt-streaked. His eyes were wide, hollow with fear. Samuel Carter. "You're safe," Elias said. "I'm here to take you home." Samuel shook his head, his entire body trembling. No, you don't understand." His voice was hoarse, as if he had been screaming for days. "You shouldn't have come." Elias frowned. "Who put you here?" Samuel's breath came fast, uneven. "I don't know. They come in the dark. They whisper. They watch." Elias glanced toward the open door. "Did you see them? Did you see him?" Samuel swallowed. "I saw something, but not a man." His fingers clenched into fists. "Not human." Elias took a steadying breath. "What do they want?" Samuel closed his eyes. "They don't want anything." His voice was barely a whisper. "They just want us to see." Then, behind them, the lantern flickered, and the whispering began. The whispers slithered through the air, coming from the darkness beyond the cell door. Elias turned sharply, his gun ready, his pulse unshaken. He had been in the presence of terrible things before. He had survived. But this was different. Samuel curled in on himself, his hands clamped over his ears. "They don't stop," he murmured. "They never stop." Elias stepped into the corridor. The whispering was everywhere, soft, insidious, like voices carried on the wind. But there was no wind down here. Then, movement. Down the hall, beyond the reach of the lantern's light, something shifted. A shadow that was too tall, too thin. It didn't move like a person. It moved like a memory unraveling. Elias tightened his grip on his revolver. "Samuel, we're leaving." The young man hesitated, then nodded. He stumbled as he stood, his body weak from days, maybe weeks, of captivity. Elias pulled him toward the exit. The whispers grew louder. They reached the stairway. Elias pushed Samuel forward. "Go. Now." Samuel climbed. Elias followed. Behind them, the whispers became laughter, low, mocking. Then, at the base of the stairs, a voice spoke. "You can run, Elias Graves, but Black Hollow never forgets." Elias did not stop. He reached the top, shoved the door shut, and locked it. Only then did the whispers stop. Only then did silence return. Samuel collapsed against the wall, his breath ragged. Elias stared at the door. It had been a mistake coming here, a mistake digging into Black Hollow's past. And now, whatever was down there, it knew his name. Samuel Carter didn't sleep that night. Neither did Elias. They sat in the detective's study, the fire burning low, the whiskey untouched between them. Samuel had spoken in fragmented sentences, his mind unraveling under the weight of what he had seen. "The town is wrong," he had whispered. "It always has been." Elias had listened. He hadn't spoken, because he knew Samuel was right. There were things buried beneath Black Hollow, things older than the town itself. And now, those things had woken up. Elias rubbed a hand over his face. He was exhausted. But there was still one question left unanswered. He looked at Samuel. "The note you left for your sister. You wrote, 'Look for the man with no face.'" Samuel hesitated. Then he whispered, "I never wrote that." Elias felt a slow, cold dread settle in his stomach. Samuel swallowed hard. His voice shook. "I found that note on my pillow the night before I disappeared." A silence stretched between them. Elias's mind turned. If Samuel hadn't written the note, who had? Then, a knock at the door. 3 soft taps, the same as before. Samuel froze. Elias stood slowly. He reached for his revolver, and as he moved toward the door, he heard a voice on the other side. Software. Familiar. His own. Elias Graves. The fire flickered. The shadows in the room seemed to stretch, and as Elias touched the doorknob, the lights went out. Elias stood in the dark, hand resting on the cold doorknob. The voice on the other side, the voice that sounded like his own, had already faded. Samuel sat motionless in the chair by the fireplace, his breath shallow, his hands gripping the arms of the chair so tightly his knuckles had turned white. The fire burned low, barely more than embers. Elias exhaled, forcing his pulse to stay steady. "Who's there?" Silence. Then, knock, knock, knock. The same rhythm as before, deliberate, unhurried. Elias tightened his grip on the revolver, his finger hovering near the trigger. Another knock, softer this time. And then, "Open the door, Elias." A whisper, his voice. Samuel let out a choked sound. "Don't," he rasped. "Please don't." Elias ignored him. His instincts warred between reason and something deeper, something primal, the urge to run. But Elias Graves did not run, not from men, not from ghosts, and not from whatever was on the other side of that door. He turned the knob. The door creaks open an inch. Cold air spilled into the room. Nothing stood on the porch, nothing he could see. But the street beyond was different. The fog had thickened, swallowing the lamplights. The town of Black Hollow no longer looked like itself. The buildings were still there, but their shapes were wrong, leaning, shifting, almost breathing. And on the porch floor, a single photograph. Elias bent down, revolver still in hand. He picked it up. The image was old, yellowed, the edges curling with time. It showed a group of people standing in the center of Black Hollow's town square. The same photo he had seen in the library. The same faceless figure was standing at the edge of the crowd. But now, something had changed. A new figure stood among them, Elias Graves. His face stared back at him, but his eyes were missing. A slow, crawling unease settled in his chest. He turned the photograph over. On the back, a message had been scrawled in jagged ink. "The town never sleeps." A gust of wind blew through the open doorway, rattling the windows. Samuel's voice was barely audible. "Close it." Elias hesitated. Then, slowly, he shut the door and locked it. The house was silent again. But outside, in the fog, something was still watching. Samuel hadn't spoken for a long time. Elias let him be. Instead, he turned to the papers scattered across his desk. The research Samuel had been doing before he disappeared. The Black Hollow Library's archives held more than just records. They had held a warning. Elias skimmed through the notes. Names, dates, events that had long been erased from the town's history. Something had happened here, a long time ago. Samuel finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "It was a town before it was a town," he murmured. Elias glanced up. "What do you mean?" Samuel swallowed. "The land. Before it was Black Hollow, before it had streets, buildings, people, it was something else, and that something is still here." Elias tapped the photograph. "The man with no face?" Samuel hesitated. Then, "He's not a man," he whispered. "He's a reminder." Elias frowned. "Of what?" Samuel's eyes flickered to the fire. "Of what happens when people forget." Elias went back to the notes. One document in particular stood out, one that had been carefully tucked away at the bottom of Samuel's pile. It was a missing persons list, decades old, hundreds of names. People who had vanished from Black Hollow over the years. Some had disappeared without a trace, others had returned, but different. And every few decades, one name reappeared. Not once, not twice, but over and over again. The same person, as if they had been taken and then given back. Elias scanned the list. His stomach turned cold. At the bottom of the page, written in shaky old ink, was a name he recognized. Elias Graves. A long, suffocating silence filled the room. Elias set the page down. He exhaled slowly. Samuel watched him, his face pale. "You see it now, don't you?" he whispered. Elias met his gaze. "I was never supposed to leave this town." Samuel nodded once. The fire crackled. Outside, the fog deepened. They didn't sleep. Elias stayed by the window, watching the street, watching the mist curl around the lamplights. Samuel sat hunched in the chair, his hands curled into fists. "We need to go," he murmured. "We need to get out of Black Hollow." Elias didn't answer, because they both knew the truth. No one ever left. "Not really." Samuel swallowed. "There has to be a way." Elias looked at the photograph again. The new version, the one where his face had been added to the past. "Maybe," he said quietly. "But we won't find it tonight." A silence stretched between them. Then, from the darkness outside, the street lamp nearest the house went out. Then the next one, and the next. The shadows grew, and somewhere in the mist, a figure stepped forward. Tall, thin, featureless, watching, waiting. Samuel let out a shaky breath. Elias tightened his grip on his revolver. The man with no face had come, and this time he wasn't going to leave. The figure in the fog. The last street lamp flickered, then darkness. Elias stood at the window, revolver in hand, eyes locked on the figure standing just beyond the porch. Samuel was frozen in the chair, breath coming too fast, too shallow. "He's here," he whispered. Elias didn't respond. He had already known. He had felt it the moment the light went out, the air shifting, the cold pressing in, the way the world outside seemed to stretch into something wrong. The man with no face did not move. He stood there, waiting, his form barely more than an outline against the swirling fog. Elias exhaled, slowly, deliberately. Then the whispering began. Not from outside, from inside the house. Samuel lurched upright. "No, no, no!" The sound came from the walls, the floorboards, the spaces between the bricks. Soft at first, like wind through old paper, then louder. More voices. Many voices. Elias Graves. The whispers slithered around him, brushing against his skin, threading into his thoughts. He forced himself to remain still. "You were supposed to stay." A shadow moved in the corner of the room. Not Samuel. Something else. Elias turned sharply, revolver raised. But there was nothing. Just the flickering fire. Samuel's hands curled into his hair. "I can hear them," he choked out. "They're inside my head." Elias reached into his desk drawer and yanked out a flask. He tossed it to Samuel. "Drink." Samuel fumbled with the cap, his hands shaking violently before he took a long swallow. Whiskey, strong enough to steady him, but the whispers did not stop. They only laughed. A slow, hollow sound. Samuel flinched. "What do they want?" Elias stared at the man with no face, still standing in the fog, watching the house. "They want us to remember," Elias murmured. Samuel's breath hitched. "Remember what?" Elias didn't answer, because he already knew. A knock, 3 times. Elias turned to the door. The same rhythm as before. 3 slow knocks. The moment stretched. Then, a second knock, from inside the house. Samuel went rigid. "Number, no, it's not real." The whispering grew louder. Elias moved carefully, his every step deliberate. He reached the door, the same door he had locked, and the lock was still in place. But the knocking hadn't stopped. He pressed his palm to the wood. It was cold, not like winter, like stone. like something very, very old. And then a voice, low, familiar, his own. Let me in. Elias's breath was steady. His grip on the revolver was firm. Samuel was trembling behind him, whispering something under his breath. Elias turned the knob, and the door opened. The town was gone. Not just covered in fog. Not just changed. Gone. The street outside wasn't Black Hollow. Elias stepped forward. His boots didn't touch the cobblestone. The ground beneath him was something else. Stone, blackened, cracked. The buildings had changed too. They weren't buildings anymore. They were outlines of buildings, hollow shadows against the swirling mist. And the sky. There was no sky. Only endless, suffocating dark. Samuel clutched the doorframe, his breath ragged. "Where are we?" Elias didn't answer. Because he knew. This was Black Hollow. But it was the other Black Hollow. The one that had been here before. A town buried beneath a town. A place that was never meant to be seen. Until now. Until then. And then, the bell tower rang. A deep, hollow sound. 1, 2, 3. Elias exhaled, midnight. Samuel gripped his arm. "We have to go," but the street was shifting. Something moved in the fog. Tall figures, many of them. Their shapes stretched unnaturally, flickering in and out of sight. Not just one man with no face. Dozens. Elias's pulse remained steady. Samuel did not. "What do we do?" Samuel whispered. Elias chambered around in his revolver. "We walk." Samuel stared at him. "Are you insane?" Elias turned to face him. "Samuel," he said quietly, "we were never going to outrun this." A slow, rasping sound echoed through the mist, like wind through hollow bones. The figures began to move, coming closer. Samuel swallowed hard. "If we die, I'm haunting you." Elias smirked. Fair enough. Then he stepped into the dark, and Samuel followed. Elias moved forward, revolver steady at his side. Samuel followed, his footsteps uneven, breath sharp with fear. The figures in the fog did not rush them. They did not attack. They only watched. Tall, silent, too many. Their forms flickered in and out of existence like an old film stuttering on a broken reel. Each time the fog shifted, their positions changed. Closer, farther, to the left, to the right. Never walking, never moving in a way the eye could follow. But still closing in. Samuel exhaled through clenched teeth. "This isn't real. It can't be real." Elias didn't respond. He knew the truth. It was real enough. The town around them no longer belonged to them. The Black Hollow they knew had peeled away, like skin slipping from bone. And now they walked in something older. Something hungry. The bell in the distance tolled again. A fourth time, a fifth. Elias's jaw tightened. "Keep moving," Samuel shuddered. "Where the hell are we going?" "To the only place left." Samuel stared at him. "And where's that?" Elias didn't stop walking. The town square. Samuel paled. "You saw the photograph. We were in the photograph. That means we were always meant to be here," Elias said calmly. "So, let's get it over with." The fog curled around them, thickening. The figures moved again. Closer this time. Elias did not look at them, because deep down, some part of him knew, if he saw them too clearly, they would see him too, and they would not let him go. They reached it in silence. The town square. Except it wasn't. Not the one they had known. The cobblestone was cracked and warped, as if something had crawled beneath it and twisted the very bones of the town. The buildings that should have surrounded the square were gone, replaced with looming shadows that pulsed and shifted as if waiting for something. And in the center, The gallows. Old. Rotting. Standing alone in the middle of the square. Samuel took a sharp step back. No. Elias's breath was steady. He stared at the wooden structure, at the single rope hanging limp from the beam, and at the shape standing beneath it. Not a shadow, not a trick of the fog. A man, or something close to one, the Hollow Man. Elias had never seen him up close, and now he wished he never had, because the Hollow Man was not just faceless. He was featureless. His body, wrong. Too long, too thin, arms that hung just a little too low, fingers that curled in a way human fingers shouldn't. And his head, smooth, untouched by anything resembling a face. But Elias could feel him staring, and at that moment he understood something terrible. The Hollow Man did not need eyes to see. He did not need a mouth to whisper, because he was not one thing. He was all of them. Every missing person, every lost soul, every name on that list in the Black Hollow archives, all here, all watching. Samuel's breath hitched. He was waiting for us. Elias exhaled. Yes. The Hollow Man raised one long skeletal hand and pointed at Elias. Samuel took a sharp step back. Oh, hell no, the whispering returned. But this time it was not distant. This time it came from everywhere at once. Elias Graves. The shadows closed in. Samuel grabbed Elias's arm. We have to go. But Elias did not move, because something was happening. The world was shifting. And then, the rope moved, not with the wind. It moved like it had found something to hold. It moved like it had found his throat. The gallows creaked. The rope tightened. Samuel shouted, Elias, move! But Elias couldn't. Something held him in place. Something old. Something stronger than the body, stronger than the mind. The whispering became screaming. Samuel shoved him, and Elias fell. Not to the ground, through something else, through time, through memory, a moment, a flicker of something lost, a trial, a crowd gathered in the square, no faces, no sound, a single name spoken in the dark. Elias Graves, you have been found guilty. A rope, a fall, a snap, a silence that never ended. Then, a return, over and over and over again. Elias gasped. He was back, back in the square, back in the fog, back on his knees. Samuel was shaking him. Elias, what the hell just happened? Elias blinked. He was alive, but the Hollow Man was still there. Still waiting. Samuel grabbed his arm. We're getting out of here. Elias allowed himself to be pulled to his feet. His heart pounded in his ribs, not from fear, from understanding, from the truth. The Hollow Man did not kill. He did not chase. He brought back the ones who had already been here, the ones who had never truly left. And Elias, he had never belonged anywhere else. Samuel pulled him away, and the Hollow Man did not follow, because he did not have to. Elias Graves was already his, and he always had been. The bell tower rang again. Midnight had passed, and the town shifted back. Elias and Samuel stumbled through the streets, the real streets. The fog lifted, the lights returned, and Black Hollow was just a town again. But Elias knew better. He knew what lay beneath. Samuel let out a shaking laugh. Did we just win? Elias stared at the empty street. The Hollow Man was gone. For now. Elias sighed. No, he said quietly. We just got a little more time. And somewhere, deep beneath the town, the whispering began again. The whispering never really stopped. Even as the town of Black Hollow settled back into the shape it had always worn, even as the streetlights flickered warm again, even as the air felt lighter, cleaner, Elias knew. It was still there, beneath, between, inside, watching, waiting. Samuel exhaled sharply, hands on his knees, bent over like he might throw up right there in the middle of the street. "Tell me that's it. Tell me it's over." Elias didn't answer. He wasn't the type to lie. Samuel swallowed hard. "I swear to God, Elias, if you don't tell me it's over, I'm walking into the sea and letting the ocean have me." Elias adjusted his coat, lighting a cigarette with hands that didn't quite shake. "Then you'll just end up back here." Samuel groaned. Of course I would. Because that's how this place works, right? We never leave. Not really. Black Hollow keeps its own." Elias took a slow drag. "Now you're starting to get it." Samuel straightened, running both hands through his hair. Nope. Not doing this. We're leaving. Tonight. Now I don't care where. We are getting on a train, a boat. Hell, we can steal a plane if we have to. I am not waking up in this town tomorrow." Elias looked at him. "Where will we go?" Samuel threw up his hands. "Anywhere." Elias let the silence stretch, let the question settle between them. Because that was the thing about Black Hollow. It wasn't a town on a map. It wasn't a place you could just wander into or out of. It was a closed loop, a thing that existed outside of where things should exist. And the people who left? They never really left. Some of them just didn't know they had come back. Elias had tried before, more times than he could count. And yet, here he was. Again. Samuel read the look on his face and took a step back. No, don't do that. Don't do the "I already know how this ends" thing. I can't take that right now." Elias sighed. "Samuel." "Nope. No, listen. We had just gotten out of the worst night of our lives. We survived. We beat it. We should be dead, but we're not. That means we have a chance. That means we can go." Elias took another drag. The smoke curled in the cold night air. "All right." Samuel narrowed his eyes. "All right." Elias nodded. "All right." Samuel hesitated, waiting for the catch, but Elias didn't give him one. Finally, he let out a breath and straightened his shoulders. Okay. First train out of town." Elias flicked his cigarette away. First train. And so they walked. The streets of Black Hollow were quiet. A little too empty. A little too still. Elias had lived through enough nights in this town to know that quiet didn't mean safe. It meant watching. But he didn't stop walking. Neither did Samuel. They kept moving, past the old courthouse, past the library, past the places they had already spent too much time in. It was all the same. The town looked the same. But it wasn't. Not anymore, because they had seen behind the curtain. They had stepped into the other Black Hollow. And that kind of thing had consequences. They reached the station just before dawn. The train was there, waiting, steam curling from its engine. The platform was empty, save for a single attendant near the ticket booth, staring at them with an unreadable expression. Samuel didn't hesitate. He marched forward and slammed a handful of crumpled bills onto the counter. 2 tickets, out of here." The attendant didn't move. He just looked at them. Not in a way that a person should look at another person. Not curious, not annoyed, just knowing. Elias held his breath. The attendant finally slid 2 tickets across the counter. Samuel grabbed them and exhaled. "Thank you, Jesus." He turned, waving the ticket in Elias's face. We're doing this. Elias took his ticket without a word. The train doors opened with a soft hiss. Samuel stepped up first, already grinning like he was drunk on relief. Elias followed, his movements slower, more careful. The moment his foot touched the train car, he felt it, The shift, a subtle, wrong thing, a loop closing. He didn't stop moving, didn't react. He just took his seat across from Samuel, hands folded over the ticket. Samuel leaned back, staring up at the ceiling. "I can't believe it. We made it. We made it." Elias exhaled. "Yeah." The train lurched forward. Samuel grinned. "So where do you want to go first? Somewhere warm? Hell, we could just pick a random stop. Doesn't even matter. Long as it's not here." Elias nodded, watching the window. Black Hollow was fading behind them. The fog was lifting. The town was disappearing. And yet... Elias reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the old photograph. The one from the archives. The one with his face on it. He turned it over and found new writing. He felt something cold curl in his ribs as he read it. "You never left." His mouth went dry. He looked up, heart hammering. Samuel was still talking, still rambling, grinning like they had escaped. Elias turned his head slowly, looking at the other passengers. The train was full, not just of people, of them, the hollow men, sitting among the passengers, watching, silent, faceless. Elias's fingers tightened around the photograph. The train kept moving, and Black Hollow never truly faded, because it never really let them go. It had only let them think it had. And the whispering began again. The train moved fast, too fast. The wheels clattered against the tracks, metal shrieking like something alive. The landscape outside blurred, not in the way of speed, but in the way of something unraveling, something coming apart at the seams. Elias stared out the window, his breath slow, measured. The town had disappeared behind them, but Black Hollow never truly left. He knew that now. He had always known. Samuel was still grinning, oblivious, stretching out in his seat like he had just escaped from hell itself. "Feels good," Samuel sighed. "Feels damn good to finally be free of that place." Elias didn't respond. He turned the photograph over in his hands, running his thumb along the words etched into the back. "You never left." The ink was old, 100 years old, 1,000. How long had he been trapped in this place? How many times had he tried to leave? How many times had he thought he left? His grip tightened. He looked at the passengers again. They hadn't moved. They hadn't spoken. Silent figures dressed in dark coats, hats pulled low, hands resting on their laps. Watching. Waiting. Samuel stretched, cracking his neck. "Man, I can't wait to see the sun rise somewhere else. Somewhere new. I don't even remember the last time I saw a real sunrise." Elias didn't look away from the faceless passengers. Their bodies were too still. No breath, no movement. Not quite real. "Samuel," he said evenly. Samuel blinked, startled by the weight in Elias's voice. "What?" Elias nodded toward the others. "Do you see them?" Samuel followed his gaze. The moment his eyes landed on the hollow men, his breath hitched. The blood drained from his face. "What the—" He shot upright in his seat. Elias, what the hell is this?" Elias didn't answer. He already knew what this was. Samuel ran a hand through his hair. His voice was rising, panic creeping in. No, we got out. I don't understand." He turned wildly toward the window, watching the blurred landscape, the shapes shifting outside the train like shadows of things that should not exist. "Where are we?" Elias leaned back, slow, deliberate. "Still on the train." Samuel wheeled toward him. "No shit. Where's the train going?" Elias exhaled. "Where do you think?" Samuel went still. His eyes flicked to the passengers again, then to the dark windows, the endless landscape outside. Then he understood. His hands curled into fists. No, this isn't happening. He pushed out of his seat. We're stopping this damn train. Elias didn't move. He already knew how this would end. He had done this before. He had tried. And he had failed. Samuel staggered forward, grabbing onto the seats as the train jolted beneath him. He reached the next car, shoving open the door, stumbling into the corridor. The moment he entered, he stopped. Elias already knew what he was seeing. Another train car, identical to the last. The same flickering lights, the same darkened windows, the same hollow men, sitting, waiting, watching. Samuel backed away, his breath coming fast. This isn't real. Elias followed him slowly. It is. Samuel shook his head violently, pressing his fingers to his temples. Number we left. I remember leaving. I remember buying the ticket. We got on. Elias stepped past him, staring down the length of the car. And what if we never did? Samuel choked out a laugh, one that had no humor. No, I'm not playing this game. He moved toward the emergency brake. His fingers grasped the handle. We stop this train, right now. Elias inhaled through his nose. Samuel wrenched the brake. Nothing happened. No sound, no jolt, no resistance. As if the handle wasn't real, as if it had never been there at all. Samuel's breathing turned ragged. Elias remained still. Samuel's hands trembled. Why isn't it stopping? The hollow men turned their heads in unison. Samuel let go of the brake. He stumbled backward, his voice breaking. They moved. Elias, they moved. Elias didn't respond. Samuel turned toward him, eyes wide. What do we do? Elias watched the hollow men slowly rising from their seats, their movements unnatural, jerking, slow but too smooth at the same time. He took a steady breath. We reached the engine. Samuel exhaled hard. We're gonna find a conductor, right? A real person? Someone who can stop this? Elias started walking. We're gonna find something. They moved through the train cars, each one identical, each one full of hollow men, sitting, watching, not moving, but closer. The further they went, the more of them there were, filling the seats, the aisles, standing in the corridors. No faces, no breath, no sound. Samuel's voice dropped to a whisper. Elias, there's too many. Elias didn't answer. He kept walking. He reached the final door, the one that led to the engine. He pushed it open. The air changed. The moment he stepped inside, he knew. The train wasn't being driven. There were no controls, no levers, no gauges, just a single chair. Empty. Samuel stumbled in behind him, his voice cracked. What the hell is this? Elias moved forward. His hands traced the smooth surface of the walls, the way the metal wasn't metal, the way everything felt wrong. Samuel backed toward the door. This isn't a train. Elias exhaled. No. Samuel swallowed hard. Then what is it? Elias turned to him. It's a loop. The hollow men were waiting outside the door. Samuel's hands clenched. You mean like a dream? Elias shook his head. No. Samuel's voice was barely a whisper. Then what? Elias stared at the empty chair. A memory. Samuel's breath hitched. Elias, don't mess with me. Elias kept his eyes on the chair. Think, Samuel. When did we get on this train? Samuel opened his mouth, stopped, his brows furrowed. At the station, we... His voice trailed off. He blinked rapidly. No, that's not right. Elias turned toward him. What's the last thing you remember before stepping onto this train? Samuel froze. His face went slack. The color drained from his skin. We were in the square, he whispered. We were... His breath caught. No. Elias exhaled. We never got on the train, Samuel. Samuel took a step back. No. Elias's voice was low, steady. We never left Black Hollow. Samuel shook his head violently. No, I remember buying the ticket. I remember. His voice cracked. We got on. We got on. Elias's fingers curled into fists. Did we? Samuel's face twisted in panic. This isn't happening. Elias turned towards the door. The Hollow Men were still there, still waiting. It already happened. The train lurched, the lights flickered, the world shuddered. The Hollow Men stepped forward. The whispering returned. Louder now, stronger, wrapping around them like vines, curling into their bones. Elias reached for Samuel. We have to wake up! Samuel was shaking. How? The Hollow Men lunged, and everything went black. It burned, not like fire, but like memory, like something being pulled back from the edge. Elias forced himself toward it, though there was no body, no movement, only will, only the unbearable weight of something fighting to keep him under, to keep him here. The whispering rose, thousands of voices overlapping, clawing at his mind, at his thoughts. Stay. Belong. Repeat. Again. The light flickered, dim and soys fading. Elias pushed. Every part of him, every thread of his existence shoved toward the light, tearing through the weight, through the black, through the grip of something that had held him for so long. A sound cracked through the void, a bell tolling, distant and wrong. The light flared. Elias gasped. His body hit the ground hard. He choked, pulling in a ragged breath, cold air burning his lungs. His fingers clawed at the stone, cobblestone. His vision swam, shapes unfocused, his name a dull ringing in his head. Elias. Hands shook him. Real hands. He turned his head, blinking hard. Samuel. Pale, eyes wild, gripping him like a lifeline. You were... Samuel was breathing too fast. You were gone. You just stopped existing. His words caught, and his grip tightened. Where did you go? Elias pushed himself up, his limbs weak, his mind still sinking between what had been real and what had not. He looked around. The square. They were back. Not on the train. Not in the void. Back in Black Hollow. Elias ran a hand down his face, grounding himself, making sure he was still whole. Samuel pulled away, standing quickly, pacing. No, I don't like this. We were gone. We were out. I remember the train. I remember leaving. Elias exhaled. It wasn't real. Samuel's hands curled into fists. Then what was it? Elias looked at the buildings around them. The town was silent. The fog had lifted, but something was still wrong. We never got on the train, Elias said quietly. We never even left this square. Samuel swallowed. Then where the hell were we? Elias met his gaze. Where they wanted us to be. Samuel's face twisted in something between anger and fear. Then why are we back? A shadow shifted at the edge of the square. Elias turned his head slowly. The Hollow Man stood beneath the bell tower. Still. Silent. Waiting. Samuel followed his gaze. His voice was barely a whisper. What now? Elias exhaled. He felt something heavy settle in his chest, something he had known all along but had not spoken. You don't leave Black Hollow, he murmured. You just wake up in another part of it. The wind curled through the streets. The town watched. The bell tolled once. And the night began again.